I am the director of the Future of Work initiative, which is powered by Microsoft, which means that Microsoft is paying for it, and Louisville Metro government, which means we are a true public-private partnership. No tax dollars are at work. But what's particularly interesting about it, and we're going to talk a little bit about the whys of this, is that Microsoft picked Louisville specifically for this initiative. And we'll talk a little bit about why, but Microsoft isn't the only one looking to Louisville to play a leadership role in the emerging data economy. So what we're going to do today is talk about what is AI, what do we need to do to be successful in the data economy, and what does this really mean for Louisville? Now, when I say AI, many people think of this. Some of the younger people here, or those who have grandkids, might think of this. A certain poor segment of the population thinks this. But a lot of people also think this or this. And I think what's important for us to recognize about the artificial intelligence and the emerging data economy is that it's very much like the internet in its 1995. So this is a picture of Bill Gates trying to explain the internet to Letterman. And that's really where we are. Nobody fully understands what this technology is going to mean. And what we do know is that it's a transformational technology. It's going to touch every aspect of business and society. So think about the internal combustion engine. The internal combustion engine, when it was first developed, had some very obvious implications. So there's the automobile. And when you think through, oh, okay, so there's going to be this new form of transportation, there's some implications about potential losers in that economy, horse-drawn carriages. What's particularly interesting is all of the secondary knock-on effects of that may or may not be obvious. So the advent of the internal combustion engine, which led to all of these incredible advances in manufacturing, and creation of wealth for workers and inventors and supply chain of that, also led almost directly to the decimation of the American agricultural scene, because not only did agricultural production require fewer workers, but 25% of agricultural production in the United States had previously gone to feed horses who were going away. It also led to the advent of consumer credit, because individual households wanted to be able to buy these large purchases which lasted over time. And it led to the beginning of the modern advertising era, because you needed to have a brand that was recognizable by people driving down roads at more than 30 miles an hour. So one of the reasons that Louisville is so interesting is that Louisville has been identified as having more industries and jobs in fields where AI can be widespread. Fields like healthcare, manufacturing, e-commerce. The Brookings Institution did a really fascinating study of all of the new patents being filed. And they figured out that the patents, they did this actually artificial intelligence-based analysis of the job skills that were referenced in those patents. And they found that those job skills were more prevalent in these industries, which means that Louisville is going to be ground zero for AI in the not too distant future. Now, there's some dangerous pieces to that, but there's also some hopeful pieces. As artificial intelligence moves across the ecosystem and becomes less about the technology, and more about the problems to be solved. So I was so excited to hear that Jeff Guam from U of L is on this call, because I want to be very clear that I stole that idea from him. What that means is that as the technology becomes more accessible, it is going to have more of a transformative effect across industry, because it's going to be usable not just by. So we're already seeing, accelerated by COVID, new models of healthcare delivery. We're seeing new ways of doing manufacturing that respect more social distance, which is probably going to involve more robots. We're seeing new ways of delivering medication to people who need it. And we're seeing different kinds of ways of using data to transform how care is even thought about or paid for, and ways that manufacturing can create revenues. So I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about what AI really means. So because a lot of what gets lumped in the concept of AI isn't really AI. There's all sorts of things that sit underneath, but there's basically only 3 things you can do with AI. And I'll highlight some Louisville companies who are working on these things. So one of those things is you can identify things. Many of the people on this call are familiar with these and have potentially gotten more familiar since being more homebound. These are margaritas. You can use artificial intelligence to identify a margarita. Now, this is a surprisingly difficult problem because these things, both margaritas, but look very different. So you have to train a computer to do that. But there's a company in town called Enable AI, and they have a margarita recognition algorithm. Now, why does that matter? It matters because if you're doing media or social media for a restaurant, you want to know what items on your menu get the most interest from your customers. You want to know what they're talking about it. And also as a part of that, you want to be able to analyze the language that they're using to say, are they saying good things about my margarita or bad things about my margarita? And once you hit scale, a certain number of restaurants, it's almost impossible to do that manually. But that's the sort of thing that you can train a computer to do. What else can you do? This one's going to hurt a little bit, and I'm sorry. You can cluster and analyze things. So this map, when it's moving, is an analysis of where every cell phone was on Derby Day last year. And you can track as people wake up, make their way to Churchill Downs, and then spread out afterwards. Now, obviously, that has a lot of implications right now for COVID. But even without that, being able to understand and cluster like things together. Oh, all of the people who are trying to work at GE Appliances live here. Oh, that has lots of implications. Many of the people who are identified as food insecure live here. And that's something that you can do in new and easier ways. And the other thing you can do is predict things. So you can know, hey, if we haven't helped somebody coming out of jail to find a job within the first 30 days, they're very likely to go back. So it gives us an opportunity to intervene earlier. Another example, there's a company in town who invests on the basis of Twitter sentiment. So they analyze the language being used about a company on Twitter and either short or invest in that company in advance of the market. And they're doing quite well. Norton Healthcare is on the absolute cutting edge of using analytics to predict who's going to come to the ER or return after they are discharged, which are the most expensive events that can happen to a hospital system. So part of this is understanding that the data economy changes the very definition of success because the data itself is seen as a resource. And this is what Dr. Guam at U of L talks about a lot. You have to value the data in order for your organization to go through the cultural transformation that it needs to use that data. So here's an example. In Louisville, we have this amazing cutting edge system for connecting nonprofits to one another. It's a referral system called United Community. It's more than 100 organizations on it. And so the idea is to create no wrong front door for anyone who shows up for social services. So I show up at Dare to Care. I show up at Family and Children's Place, and they say, oh, here's my info. They collect my information, and I can get referred. Now, in the pre-data economy world, the success of that kind of an intervention would be entirely about, did I get referred to the right place when I walked in the door? Well, now, if I get referred and don't show up, that's useful information. If the community does not have enough needs or enough beds to meet the needs for homeless people, and we can quantify that number, that by itself is an important piece of information. And that just is a different framing for the universe than the non-data economy. And that's the kind of the cultural transformation that we need to make as companies, but also as a community. Now, I think there are some really important things that we need to flag as we move towards that data economy. Issues of privacy and transparency, particularly if you're doing predictions, the biased nature of the data going in based on the long legacy of institutional racism. We just need to be very aware of that. And we're all thinking about, or at least we should be, the privacy implications, particularly in light of COVID. So, in no way hear me as an apologist for this technology. These are things that are real and we just need to be aware of them. I'm going to give a very concrete example of what I mean by there being a transformation that's happening in organizations. So this is a friend of mine. She is a brand manager and innovator within KFC. Her background is in food science. She has 3 items on the McDonald's permanent menu, and she is in no way technologically savvy. But she's in charge of innovation. In fact, various combinations of chips and chicken that you might have heard about came out of her office. So she's interested in what customers are saying in her areas of innovation. Well, her old process for understanding that would be they'd put something into the field, and then she would request that data from finance. She'd have to wait several weeks and come back. She'd manipulate that in Excel and then ask for updates and repeat that process while trying to understand how best to move forward. Now, because they have begun the process of understanding the value of their data, she has real-time access to that data, which gives her the ability to manipulate and visualize and guide business recommendations without that process. So what that really means is that by embracing a culture of data, it enables non-technical people to use data to create insights. So last thing before I hand it over to Alisia, we recognize and heard a lot about the dangers that are going to come as we reduce demand in certain fields. What we talk less about is the opportunity that comes by creating demand in other fields that enable people to use this technology to focus on what is truly differentiating about humans. The human interaction, community care coordinators working with someone to improve their health outcomes or their education outcomes, creating new opportunities for business. So I am going to hand it over to Alisia here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alisia McClain, and I work with Ben with the Future Work Initiative. So as he talked about in the first component, what is AI and what can we do with it? And then, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what is needed to be successful in the data economy, and in particular, what my role is, or what our role is in the thinking about how we connect education to industry to be ready for these new jobs. And in some ways, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what these new jobs will look like necessarily, but we understand that we need to put measures in place on the education front and to a certain extent on the industry front in order to prepare for the data economy and for the advent of AI. So before COVID, our role was to try and build a pipeline between education and industry. And just to be clear, it still is, but it was a little bit more of a hard lift before. We were trying to create an ecosystem. We are trying to create an ecosystem of educators and industry leaders. And the idea is to build that pipeline. The pipeline exists, but it's leaky in some places. So the idea is to bridge the gap between industry and education in both ways. So to make opportunities and apprenticeships available to education, and then also for education to understand what industry, what skill set is necessary in industry, because this is changing as we increase our technological advancement at an exponential rate. So obviously there are different levels of AI skills and data literacy that are necessary. So part of it is comprehending the impact and understanding without actually being able to employ the technology, understanding what questions can be asked and answered by automation and AI. And then there's the actual, like, getting your hands dirty with the AI and data skilled and data driven components, where you're thinking about actually, like, how are you going to program or write the algorithm? What is the data set that you're going to use to train the machine in how to have an accurate output? And so then there's also at the community level, the general public does need to understand the potential of AI and have their fears of Skynet mitigated. But that's sort of a cautionary tale, because just as the internet is, AI is not a technology that is inherently bad or inherently good. It's kind of it's basically the result of the hands that it's in, right? And there's no doubt in anyone's mind that it will fall into the hands of people who will not use it for good. That's part of our experience as humans. So it's not just about mitigating fears, it's also about education around ethics that are necessary for AI, and also thinking about inequities that exist and could be and will be actually will continue to exist because of the advent of AI and of people thinking of AI as sort of separate from human interaction. Like, oh, well, computers are very good at this, but the computer is only as good as the data that is fed to it. So a complete data set is imperative, because AI has the capacity to change lives and to make decisions that really impact people's lives. So COVID hit, and we were kind of like, oh no, like, what do we do now? I guess kind of like everybody else. But then we realized that this is the future of work. And this is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to prepare the workforce, prepare the general public to be ready for the advent of a new technology. And it just so happens that I don't want to phrase it as COVID worked in our favor, because obviously there's a lot of suffering that is going on because of this pandemic. But for us personally, it gave us an opportunity to reach people who were at home, who typically, or not typically, atypically had a lot of more time on their hands. So this might be a really great opportunity to upskill, to learn about data science, to increase your knowledge in the comfort of your own home at a time where there might not be, unless you have a 2-year-old, a whole lot else to do. You may feel a little bored. So we partnered with Microsoft. You can see the group down at the bottom. There was a partnership that was formed between these groups at the bottom. We started out with an iteration of open access online self-led courses that are free. And we also implemented a 30-day upskilling challenge where if you earn a badge, you can send it in and be entered into a raffle to win a laptop. The next component is to have some virtual workshops so that you can actually explore some of the career fields that exist. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. And then also what's coming up is an intensive upskilling where you actually select a career track, and you're actually in a cohort. It's instructor led. It has the human touch component to it. So it's not just self-led, self-paced. You're actually in a classroom, albeit virtually. But obviously the research shows that the completion rate, the attrition rates are much higher when you have the human touch component, where you can actually interact with people in a classroom. Great thing about this is that there's ongoing support to maximize the completion. And there's also a stipend available to help people in this time, obviously, and then also so that you can try to minimize distractions. So here are the 4 industry-aligned career choices. So we've got software development, data analyst, digital marketing, and UX design. And so you can see at the bottom all of the amount of jobs that are open in these fields. So obviously these are very much in demand jobs and industry skills that we want to prepare people to take on once the economy sort of boosts back up. I'm back on. Okay, and so centered in everything that we do, and I just want to give a shout out to Ben, who is my boss. He has focused diversity and inclusion in every aspect, and in everything that the Future of Work does. He has encouraged diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so part of that is our favorite. her name is Fleur. This is Fleur right here. She's she's the face of the Future of Work. And so we're very proud of Fleur, and we're very proud of our initiatives that seek to use this opportunity to address some of the inequity that exists and the lack of participation that exists in the field of computer science, data science, and to center everything that we do in an inclusion model that isn't just neutral, but also intentional in its approach to include groups that historically have been marginalized in this field. And our approach is that we're here to help. It's not punitive, it's not accusatory, it's that these are difficult. These are very difficult issues, and we are here to help you to have a candidate pool, increase your candidate pool so that increase the diversity of your candidate pool so that it reflects the demographics of the population that you're pulling from. And so at the end of the day, the tech has to live up to our values. And that's for us at the Future Work Initiative and us as humans, really. We're looking for thinking about fairness, reliability, and safety, and through it all, a thread of transparency and accountability. Otherwise, we get the Terminator. So then there are real issues that have to be taken into consideration, which is a whole talk by itself about the bad, I guess you could say, that can come of AI, and that we as a community and as community members need to be aware of some of the unethical and dangerous ways that AI can be employed. And I'll give it back to Ben. He's going to talk about what does the data economy mean for Louisville? And I will stop sharing my screen.
And I will share mine. Back to Fleur. We're in the middle of training Fleur. So those of you who have seen me talk on various other things know that I am not actually an expert in artificial intelligence. And so we're doing a lot of learning on the fly. And one of the really fun things is we're actually going to train her using artificial intelligence to be able to help people navigate the resources that are available to them as individuals and as companies in our community. Part of what has been really interesting about this work is the coalition that has come together around it. I think as a community, we really recognize that this is one of those rare opportunities that we have when there's no one ahead of us. With the exception of a little bit of work being done in Silicon Valley and a little bit of work being done in Boston and a little bit of work being done in Pittsburgh, we are literally at the cutting edge of this. And that's, for me as a Louisvillian, I find that really exciting. And I want to give a particular shout out to the revival of our anchor university, University of Louisville, and their involvement in this. Sharon Carrick is on this call. You heard Dr. Quam. And there are several others. The University of Louisville, before this hit, had 6 separate data science programs. And Dr. Carrick is uniting those programs so that they work together. But I think what's really interesting is that they have been such a generous partner in helping us to figure out how to upskill our community as a whole, not just people connected to U of L. So if you go to our website, you'll get connected to their website where they've got a listing of free micro credentials that you can do, some of which you can do in as little as 20 minutes. We're actually in the middle of a 30-day upskilling challenge. So if anyone who is at home would like to spend a little time figuring out what this whole thing is about, there's several non-technical trainings that you can do to understand more about AI. And that goes all the way through free self-paced trainings that Alisia mentioned, where you can actually learn to code. But I just think we're really lucky to have an institution that is in the midst of its own strategic transformation and is really focused on helping get our entire community in the place it needs to be, which is connected to what we really need and what we're hoping for out of this work. We really need to balance both the talent supply and demand in Louisville, so that as companies are in the midst of this digital transformation and they come to have a different attitude about their data and they're looking for people and organizations who can do that, we have the talent supply to meet those needs. So that brings us to Microsoft and why Microsoft is here. So Microsoft was the recipient of this Brookings analysis about communities that were most impacted by AI. Actually, there were several communities that are more impacted by AI than us, but Brookings said, no, you guys need to work in Louisville, because in Louisville, there is a leadership that could support the kind of real transformation that you want to do. So the work of the Future of Work initiative is focused on 3 areas. We talked about workforce transformation and aligning the for-profit and not-for-profit education institutions that go down into K-12, and some of Alisia's work with Technique in bringing different people into the data economy. That's working with industry to help them understand what's coming and what they can do to be doing the disrupting, not being disrupted. We hosted a conference earlier this year in what feels unfathomable. We gathered more than 1,100 people in one room to talk about AI and the innovations happening in the community. And Alisia mentioned that we are focused on both the good that is possible out of AI, which also means defending against the bad, and on being sure that at the end of our adoption into this technology, we have a different set of outcomes for our entire community, and that the tech workforce looks very different than it looks right now. So people keep asking in the chat room, like, why Louisville? So I'll talk about a couple of Louisville's unfair advantages. We have, because of our size and makeup, because of some coincidences and strong leadership, a set of resources that are very attractive to outsiders. One, within the University of Louisville, but also expand, we have what's called the Envirome Institute that's collecting environmental information and genomic information. Christy Lee Brown is instrumental in that. You've heard probably some of the work that they've done as citizen scientists with asthma and trees. So that is a massive set of data. I've learned new words about how much data can exist. They have petabytes of data that they're working to innovate with. The Louisville Healthcare CEO Council, I know Tammy York-Bay is a member. I don't know if she's here today. The 12 largest healthcare companies in town have united to look at what are the common problems across their organizations and make data available for innovators, which is game-changing. I talked about United Community and the ability that has meant for us, between that and Metro United Way's 211 program, to really focus COVID response on the areas where we're seeing the highest need. Almost no community in the country has that kind of data available. And our city's open data platforms are regularly recognized as the most innovative in the country. So it's not just Microsoft who thinks we're amazing. Also, IBM, Sharon and I were on a webinar yesterday where we talked about the unique partnership that the University of Louisville has developed with IBM to do upskilling of faculty and students. Pfizer has opened the first of 8 adult population health research centers in the world, and the only one that is going to be in the United States, in Louisville, because the 9 hospitals that treat adults in this region were willing to share data. And they were willing to share data because one senior physician at each of those hospitals was trained by Dr. Julio Ramirez. And so when someone came in with pneumonia, and now with COVID, there's already an infrastructure in place for that data sharing, which exists almost nowhere else in the world. And finally, I don't know how many people on this call know who this is, but this is Jack Harlow. He is a Louisville native son who is currently the number 27 best-selling rap artist in the world. He's from Louisville. He's also the son of Maggie Harlow, Reno-Weber. So he also thinks we're awesome. So what do we need from you? We need stories. As your organizations, the organizations you're connected to and volunteer with, start to understand and adapt to their data, we'd love to hear about it. And tell people how to get connected to us. As you, your kids, your grandkids are looking to upskill, send them to our website so we can help them to navigate what's coming next. We need connections to the people who are doing this. Senior level managers in particularly the health and manufacturing space, that's who we're trying to connect with. And we need to be telling the story of Louisville at the cutting edge of this data economy. Part of what's going to make that reality is if we talk about it ourselves. So I'm going to stop right there and let you guys ask questions. If they're easy, I'll take them. If not, Alisia, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much, Ben and Alisia. That was a terrific presentation. We really, really appreciate it. Very, very interesting material. We have 2 or 3 questions here, excuse me, that I'd like to put to you all. The first question that I have is from Kevin Lynch, and Kevin asks if you would, and this is directed to either one of you, if you would please give us your thoughts on how much innovation you think will result from the working from home situation that we all find ourselves in right now. Going forward, how do you think things will be different and perhaps improved?
You got that one? You want me to take it?
Sure, jump in. Yeah, go ahead.
I think a lot of innovation is going to happen. I hate to say that there are, well, at least you referenced this a little bit earlier, who's winning COVID. But there are a lot of Louisville companies who are winning COVID. You look at the platform for live social media, that is Switcher Studio. They've seen their customers double. They were just raised money. And there are a number of examples of Louisville companies like that. I think the idea that we're not coming back from this. Whatever happens next is just going to be different. And so I think we really have an opportunity to take advantage of that if we make the appropriate investments in ourselves. So that's making it easy for people to start businesses. It's making it possible for people who wouldn't have thought of themselves as entrepreneurs to be entrepreneurs. It's creating networks that are intentional and intentionally open. I think one of the fascinating pieces of this is that we're going to have many fewer smoky back rooms because no one's going to be in a back room. And how do we really create open opportunities for people to get networked with the people who understand, how things work in our community?
I would just add to that and say, I think COVID has forced a lot of us to interact with technology that maybe would not have necessarily done it before. I mean, here we are. I don't know how many members the Rotary Club has, but it's a lot just on the screen. And I'm sure that at least for someone in this room, adjusting to Zoom or having a virtual meeting was maybe a little bit of a heavy lift. But now that people have done it and understand how to, I know I'm speaking from experience. I know there's people who are like, okay, how does this technology work, et cetera. But so as a whole, I think we have been forced to become more comfortable with technology. And there's also, once this is lifted, I think there will be a level of efficiency there will be a focus on efficiency that wasn't present before. I kind of think about trying to work from home with a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old as training as an athlete with like ankle weights. So like when my 2-year-old goes back to daycare, I'm just gonna be like, I'm gonna be Michael Jordan. And so the fact is that, you know, JCPS probably at the onset thought there's no way that we can, you know, we can go to this non-traditional instruction. Obviously there's road bumps in it, but it has, but they're doing it. I know my kid is doing it. So, and then you start to think about like, how could AI be deployed in that sphere? How could AI be deployed to understand and predict engagement among students in JCPS that are doing NTI? Will this become a permanent option? There's so many questions and so many opportunities that are presented based on, I mean, COVID-19 has sort of like, it has been like a tidal wave of technology, forcing every person from every demographic, from every, like in every way, and in every context, to at least, you know, I should say to embrace technology in a new way, and to embrace technology as a way to stay connected with people as well. I wish that they would talk more about AI and how they're using the predictive analytics to determine what the curve will look like in the future. I think it's a really great opportunity to kind of talk about like the importance of AI and, you know, see some of the models like aren't turning out, you know, and to talk about the science, the data science behind that would be a really great opportunity. But yeah, I think that there will be a focus on efficiency and people may be more open to embracing new forms of technology like AI.
Very good. Before I get to the next question, in going through all of the questions and comments, Ben, I want to make sure that you're aware that we had a comment from our guest, Jeff Guan, today, and he says, because you mentioned his name twice, he owes you 2 beers. So I want to make sure you're able to collect on that. Okay.
Jeff.
Our next question. Our next question comes from Tom Bonert, and Tom asks for Alisia. How can one connect with the education process that you referred to?
Yeah, so Dr. Carrick actually, I think, put in a link in the chat. That's the link to so this is a partnership. So we sort of were like trying to catch everybody at every, you know, from a different angles. So Dr. Carrick put a link in for the digital transformation. I guess it's a department or initiative at U of L. And then also you can go to our website, futurelu.com, and scroll down to the COVID-19 Reskilling Initiative, and ask if you would to, there's a lot of people here, it'd be a really great opportunity to spread the word. If you have an opportunity on your social media to, you know, give us a blast. We want to involve as many as possible in as many different demographics and geographic regions and different education levels in this initiative. So those are your 2 options. I mean, there's more, but those are enough. You go to either one of them and it'll connect you. If you want to be part of our 30-day upskilling challenge because maybe your laptop needs a refresh, then you have to go to thefuturelu.com. Okay. Yes, and Jeff Guan, I just want to give Jeff Guan just mention, I don't want to speak for you, Dr. Guan, but there's a chat in there from Dr. Guan about a Microsoft Business School that you can sign up for.
Okay, terrific. Very good. Thank you all very much. That concludes our questions. And again, on behalf of the Rotary Club, we want to thank Ben and Alisia for this very informative presentation.